Well, President Obama seems to be hitting the repeat button on his line about phony scandals. In his weekly radio address yesterday, he once again said the Republicans are drumming up all these fake controversies to avert attention from the economy. Take a listen.
Too often over the past 2 years, Washington has taken its eye off the ball. They've allowed an endless parade of political posturing and phony scandals to distract from growing our economy and strengthening the middle class.
He said that about 10,000 times in the last 2 weeks. Let's bring in our political insiders. John LeBoutillier, former Republican congressman for New York. Pat Caddell, Fox News contributor and a former pollster for President Jimmy Carter. Doug Schoen is also a Fox News contributor and a former pollster for Bill Clinton. He joins us live in our Los Angeles bureau. So, Doug, let me start with you. Intel Chief Clapper apologizes for lying about the NSA program. The IRS lies about the program, admits wrongdoing, apologizes, lies again, and gets caught. And, of course, Benghazi's a bit of a mess. But these are somehow phony?
Well, this is classic distraction, Gregg. We have an economy that is having tepid economic growth, tepid growth in and of itself, and the labor market participation is relatively low. So the Obama administration has got a modest case to make on the economy. The scandals are very, very serious. We'll talk about them today, I think, in great detail, particularly Pat Caddell. But bottom line, you have dysfunctionality also in Washington. The only asset that the president really has is Republican disarray. They are totally divided on the budget, and the president is basically doing a divide and conquer strategy to take modest credit for modest gain, but to blame the Republicans, try to demonize them, and above all else, turn away from the so-called phony scandals.
All right, let me play a clip from the White House Press Secretary Jay Carney, because this would appear to be a sort of constant theme within the White House. Scandals. What scandals? Take a listen.
What we've seen as time has passed and more facts have become known, whether it's about the attacks in Benghazi and the talking points, or revelations about conduct at the IRS, that attempts to turn this into a scandal have failed.
What about that, Pat?
Well, other than him being about the most disingenuous person ever stand on that podium, let me tell you, we face a crisis in American democracy of proportions none of us have ever seen in terms of these widespread scandals of government abuse. And the real problem is that for the first time in American history, you have the party in power, the party out of power, and the news media, all who either are co-conspirators, accessories, or accomplices, or AWOL from all of this, or purposely AWOL, and therefore no one in this country is telling the American people the danger of what's happening, and that Washington, and this is a Washington elite scandal, that the enemy of the American people, their enemy is you, the American people, and that's the real story here.
Congressman?
Well, you know what upsets me the most in all of it? I expect the worst out of this administration. I expect the worst as a conservative out of any administration. It's the other party that needs to check and balance the party in the White House. And the Republicans have dropped the ball. What Pat just said is 1,000% correct. They are really complicit in covering up Benghazi. Boehner refuses to name a select committee, even though a majority of Republicans in the House have written to him. Frank Wolf, very good congressman from Virginia, has told the Speaker, if you won't name a select committee, you are complicit in the cover-up. And what we now suspect is Boehner won't do it, and maybe he used that as leverage on the president to get this ridiculous fix of Obamacare so that we are paying for the health care of Capitol Hill staffers and congressmen. It's like a payoff for keeping quiet on Benghazi.
All right, let me pick up on what you just said on Obamacare and go to Doug Schoen. You know, the president said there's really no need to follow the law here. He's handing out delays. He's handing out exemptions, about 2,000 plus waivers to, you know, his supporters and unions and so forth. Is that a measure, do you think, Doug, of executive arrogance?
than arrogance. I think it is creeping government authoritarianism. What Pat and John are talking about is absolutely right. But when the president says, as he said repeatedly, if I don't like what Congress is doing, I'll do it myself, he is basically eviscerating the traditional checks and balances that have been the hallmark of our system. What you're pointing to is an example of a law that is unpopular, where the president is basically making law as he goes along. It's outrageous behavior. And as I said, the only thing that is really working to his advantage is the Republican opposition now is in such disarray. They're having a civil war over the budget. They can't get together. They're fighting with one another over immigration, the budget, foreign policy. Bottom line, that's the president's only ally. But this is an administration that is increasingly making its own law, ruling on its own basis, and acting against the American people.
Pat, is there also legislative arrogance because Congress has the temerity to grant itself an exemption from Obamacare costs while Americans every day are getting hit with premium shock?
They do this every day. But we need to understand what the other part of the legislative crisis is. The Benghazi, which you mentioned, the scandal about Benghazi. Let's start with that, where we have John Boehner, who has been purposely suppressing anything on Benghazi because he knew what we found out this week, and he had approved it. These CIA teams on the ground, which were sending weapons from Libya through Turkey to Syrian rebels without congressional approval. And what we have is we find out, and by the way, remember, no one has still been arrested in this. We have a president who has suppressed the truth in administration. We have John Brennan, who left the White House, went to the CIA, and what is the CIA doing? They are polygraphing every member of the people who are on the ground there, keeping them from telling the Congress the truth, and the Congress won't act in its own defense.
That's the thing. Why won't the Congress want to get at the truth of this thing? We used to say 4 people were dead, the ambassador and 3 other people. We now learn this week that there were other people injured. 36 CIA personnel evacuated right away during
Fox
the
News
attack.
learning that some of them are being told to clam up by the administration,
or else
signing non-disclosure agreements.
Yeah. So what does that
Never
smell like?
in
That's
history
cover-up of something. And the public has a right to know. I really think, I don't want to sound like we need a million committees, but we need 2 committees. We need the Benghazi Select Committee, and we need another one on the abuse of executive power that goes into the IRS, which is a growing scandal. We've now, Pat can trace it right into the White House counsel's office in 2010. Bob Bauer, the White House counsel then, married to Anita Dunn, one of the Obama insiders. And they're having meetings with the head of the IRS in the White House the day before they target the president in the Roosevelt room.
And other people, and we don't know, but Bob Bauer is the name. He was the counsel. He comes in. He is the person, 2008, this week we found out, who went to the FEC. The FEC Republican members issued a harsh memo this week saying the staff on its own, and guess who they went to? Guess who was on the staff? Lois Lane Lerner was there to help them pursue Obama's enemies. I guarantee you this stuff goes directly
Greg, it's not just, I'm sorry.
Directly into the White House and members of the White House staff.
Somebody here is fired up.
Pat, are you exercised over this thing?
Yes, I'm
Are you
afraid
a Democrat?
Yes.
So you're exercised over phony
more than
scandals.
the Republicans,
Why aren't the Republicans half
Because
as
you know
ticked
what?
off?
It's about the country, and they don't put the country.
Let me squeeze in a little bit about the IRS with Doug Schoen. You know, the president promised, Doug, to get to the bottom of this thing. And yet now we're learning that the IRS is accused of stonewalling and redacting documents that Congress is requesting. And people, of course, are clamming up taking the fifth. Is that a legitimate, serious scandal, even though the president says it's phony?
Oh, of course it's serious. I mean, it began with the administration denying it was a scandal. Then there was outrage. Then it was low-level employees. This week we saw Danny Werfel tell Darrell Issa, bottom line, I prioritize what documents I give you. We're doing it at our own pace, our own way, and we'll get to them. So it's pretty outrageous, Greg.
Well, what's outrageous is that Pat needs to try decaf, okay? Because he's really exercised over this.
Sorry, I think every American should be.
A table for 2, sparking a whole lot of political intrigue. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton joining her former boss, President Obama at the White House for really nice lunch outdoors. Isn't that pretty? This was last Monday. Was the main course, though, her possible 2016 presidential run. So let's bring them back in. John LeBoutillier, Pat Caddell, and Doug Schoen, who is in Los Angeles. Well, is this, Doug, a passing of the torch?
Well, let's just say anytime a popular president, at least inside his own party, lunches with, goes on TV with, and speaks about a former member of his administration, politics is at its core. So the answer is, of course, it is. That being said, if you're the Clintons and Obama, given the both good feeling that now exists and the rivalry from the prior campaign, if you're Hillary Clinton, you want to keep the president as close as you can. And every minute that they are together is one less minute that the president can be doing anything with his vice president who wants to run as well.
Now, there was her famous, some call it a rant in front of Congress. She was dismissing finding out about how 4 Americans were murdered by terrorists on her watch. Here it is.
The fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make?
Is that her Achilles heel?
Yes, it is, except the Republicans, led by John Boehner and crew, won't deal with it. And you would think they would want to, given what Obama said. But let me tell you what this picture was. We said it tonight. I said it tonight in the 60 Minutes interview when he called up. The president said, "I want to go on 60 Minutes for a loving."
Yeah. It was quid pro quo.
I said it was if he was paying her off for Benghazi. But that picture is the 2 people, him passing what John said, the baton to her. And basically, these are 2 people covering up for each other. One of the greatest crimes in American history. It could be her undoing, and he needs her to keep her mouth shut.
And what kind of democracy is it? And what kind of party are the Democratic Party? If I were a Democrat, thank God I'm not, but if I were, to have this guy jam her down my throat as if to say she's going to be the nominee and the next president, to keep the lid on all of these messes.
It's a little bit like Charlie Rangel here in New York, the congressman who is now interviewing people to be his replacement.
Where's that?
I always thought the voters decided.
No, not anymore. That's my point. When I said this is a war against the American people, we saw that this week again on the health care thing with Boehner and Obama getting together to take care of the Hill and the staff so they didn't pay. But no, in a bigger way, this is, we need to suppress the voice of the American people.
All right, gentlemen, our political insiders out of time. Thank you so much. You can always get more from the political insiders every Monday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, live.foxnews.com. There we are, a pretty picture of Doug and John and Pat. You can also follow them on Twitter at FN Insiders. We'll be right back.